Hello, all you big, beautiful brains out there. Today, we're talking about being scared of the dark. We're celebrating scary season all this month, so before we get started, take a minute to subscribe to Psy vs. Psy. Help out your haunting neighborhood psychologist while I tell you all about why people go out of their way to avoid being caught in the dark. From songs to movies to scary stories, there's a ton of media we consume that features being scared of the dark. I mean, when I was a kid, I used to watch reruns of this show on repeat. Which maybe says more about me, but the question remains, why is being afraid of the dark so everywhere in our culture? Let's start with the basics. What is being afraid of the dark? And then we'll get into some possible explanations as to why we see it so much. First, let's separate what kind of fear of the dark I'm talking about, because there are different kinds. This video is going to look at that near universal wariness and creepiness that almost everyone has felt at some time or another when they are in the dark. There is another type of more extreme fear of the dark known as nyctophobia, and it's classified as a specific phobia by psychologists. To be classified as a phobia, your fear has to be so intense and pervasive that it significantly impacts how you think and act on a regular basis. And you'll also usually experience physical symptoms like shaking, nausea, excessive sweating, or heart palpitations. Phobias present with extreme behavioral components. So while a lot of people may be scared of the dark or even prefer to use a nightlight, we need to make sure we aren't conflating an everyday fear or uncomfortableness with having a phobia. Nyctophobia is a serious condition and probably deserves a video all on its own. What we're talking about is an everyday fear of the dark, which, while scary, might actually be useful. Evolutionary psychologists would explain a fear of the dark by looking to our ancestors. For early humans, it was beneficial to stay quiet and still at night in order to avoid big predators. This is also called the adaptive theory of sleep, and it could mean that fear of the dark is actually healthy. Remember, humans weren't always as safe and secure from nature as we are now. If you are motivated to rest when it's dark, you're more likely to stay healthy and safe, or, for early humans, to stay alive. Going along with this evolutionary line of reasoning is that we humans are diurnal, meaning that we are mostly active during the day. That means that being active and awake at night is unusual, unexpected. We can expect our bodies and brains to respond differently when we're working outside of our typical active period. Animal researchers have studied this quite a bit in rats and mice, who are nocturnal animals, meaning they have their typical active period at night. In nocturnal animals, researchers have found that they learn fear responses faster during the day, probably because that's outside of their normal active period. They're more easily scared during the day. Our internal clocks play a big part in how easy it is to be scared during different times. Fear of the dark is one of the most pervasive fears all across the globe. While some experts claim around 11% of adults have this fear, survey data from 2020 shows that around half of adults in the US report being scared of the dark, and that percentage could be even higher in children. Since it's so pervasive, maybe it's something about our actual bodies. So let's consider a biological reason. It makes logical sense to study how we even tell that we're in the dark. Human eyes, for the most part, see better and clearer during the day. Most people can see fairly faintly in the dark after our eyes have had some time to adjust. But we will never see as accurately in the dark as we do in the light. Also, light pollution from modern tech can really impact just how well our eyes can adjust. Remember, our use of electric lights is still very new in terms of human history. The types of lights that we regularly use now might be impacting our visual processing in ways we don't yet understand. There's even a segment of the population who has even more trouble with adjusting to the dark because of a condition called night blindness. Night blindness, also called nyctalopia, can be caused by a few different conditions that impact the retina, and some forms are even genetic. But everyone who has it operates at a severe disadvantage in the dark. Kids with night blindness report far more severe fears of the dark and report feeling helpless. But it's not diagnosed very often, since parents typically dismiss this biological issue for kids just being scared. Biologically, there's more to it than just our eyes. Being out at night in the dark is going to be a different experience for all of our senses. Studies show that just being in the dark is enough to increase how startled you are by a noise. So when we hear something go bump in the night, it's scarier for us than it would be during the day. There are also studies that show our sense of smell and taste are both heightened in darkness or even low light. So part of our heightened anxiety in the dark could be due to most of our other major senses kicking into high gear when it's night. It might also be that our brains change in response during darkness too. In a 2021 paper that I'll link below, they showed that being exposed to light changes the activity in part of your brain called the amygdala. The amygdala plays a large part in how we experience fear and anxiety. There are neurons from the retina that connect directly to the amygdala, which could be predisposing us to experience more fear when the lights go down. In other words, our brains might be wired to make us more scared in the dark. There's one more big reason that we haven't considered. I mentioned that kids tend to report being scared of the dark more, but understanding their fears could be another reason all in itself. Almost 3/4 of children report being scared of the dark, and they say that fear wasn't learned. No one deliberately set out to purposefully teach kids how to be scared of the dark. But studies show that parents and caregivers are often greatly underestimating if their child is scared of the dark and just how scared they are. Parents not realizing or shrugging off kids' fears could be another big reason why so many adults stay afraid. If that fear is never really addressed, it's not going to go away. So kids learn to cope, but never really get over it. That suggests that fear of the dark has become almost an expectation, the normal instead of the exception. If you want to know more about the things that make us afraid, or about things like scary movies or Halloween masks that might contribute to our fear of the dark, we'll leave some links to some of our other scary videos. And if you want to know more about the creepy things in your brain, make sure you subscribe to Psy vs. Psy so you can get all of our other videos and you can learn all about the science of psychology. Until next time, keep thinking, and I'll see y'all later. Bye! By the way, if you are scared of the dark, I think I've figured out the answer. Check it out.
Whoa, that's awesome.